The queen who turned England into a fortress she was born unwanted, declared illegitimate, imprisoned by her own sister, and nearly executed before she ever wore a crown. Yet from the ashes of danger and betrayal, Elizabeth Tudor rose to become one of the most powerful rulers the world had ever seen. She reigned not through marriage, armies, or inherited stability. She ruled through sheer force of will. The woman England once doubted became the queen who rebuilt her nation, crushed her enemies, and faced down the greatest empire of her time. Behind the paintings and legends lies a far darker, deeper truth. Elizabeth I survived by becoming a warrior not with swords, but with intelligence sharper than steel. Watch till the end, like, subscribe, and share if you want more untold royal stories. Don't miss the secret life of Britain's greatest warrior queen. Asterisk Part 1. The unwanted princess who learned to survive. Elizabeth Tudor entered the world on September 7, 1533, beneath a cloud of disappointment thick enough to choke the royal court. King Henry VIII had prayed no, demanded a son. Instead, fate delivered a daughter. Small, red-haired, alert, and utterly unaware that her birth had already fractured the destiny of a kingdom. Her mother, the brilliant and doomed and tried to hide the trembling fear beneath her smile as the court whispered. A girl was not an heir. A girl was a problem. A girl was a political threat waiting to happen. From the moment Elizabeth opened her eyes, she was surrounded not by affection, but by doubts sharp enough to pierce armor. Yet even in infancy, she seemed to watch everything. Servants later said her gaze felt older than she was, as if she recognized danger long before she learned to walk. Danger came quickly. Henry VIII's affection for Anne Boleyn rotted into suspicion. Court rivals sharpened their knives, weaving lies, accusations, and rumors of treason. Elizabeth grew from a celebrated infant to a silent witness of her mother's downfall. At just 2 years old, she was declared illegitimate. Her title princess was stripped away. Her position vanished. And her mother, Elizabeth, never even knew when she was taken to the Tower. Anne Boleyn's execution left a toddler alone, politically useless, a reminder of a union Henry wanted desperately to erase. She was exiled from court, sent to remote estates, raised by tutors instead of parents, and taught early that affection in the Tudor world was a fragile luxury. But adversity became her tutor. While other nobles bathed in privilege, Elizabeth Warwick studied obsessively. At an age when most children struggled to read, she devoured languages: Latin, Greek, Italian, French. By 10, she debated philosophy. By 12, she translated classical texts with the skill of a seasoned scholar. Her mind became her armor, her intelligence, her shield. She learned to read the expressions of those around her, to sense lies, to hide her own thoughts behind a mask of polite stillness. She learned survival not through protection, but through the brutal absence of it. And yet the storm was far from over. When Henry VIII died in 1547, Elizabeth's half-brother, Edward VI, took the throne. The realm shifted. Ambitious men circled him like wolves. Elizabeth, now a teenager, became a target not because she wanted power, but because she represented it. Anyone who controlled her might control the crown. Then came Thomas Seymour, handsome, reckless, and dangerously charming. Seymour pursued her during her stay at his household. He entered her rooms early in the morning, tickled her, flirted with her, tested the boundaries between impropriety and scandal. Elizabeth tried to manage the situation with her typical brilliance, but rumors exploded. The court whispered she had been seduced. Seymour's actions, desperate and foolish, nearly ruined her. When he was arrested for treason, the investigation turned to Elizabeth. Ministers interrogated her for weeks. Every question had a hidden blade. Every answer could condemn her. But Elizabeth navigated their traps with an icy precision, far beyond her years. She left them nothing, no confession, no weakness, no weapon used against her. She emerged, scarred, but victorious. Still, the gravest threat waited ahead. To the crown taken in a time of chow when Elizabeth ascended the throne in November 1558. England was a wounded kingdom gasping for stability. The air smelled of smoke from religious burnings under Mary Tudor. The treasury was nearly empty. The people were divided, frightened, exhausted. Protestant and Catholic tensions threatened to ignite into civil war. Foreign powers, France, Spain, Scotland, watched England like vultures circling an animal too weak to stand. Into this chaos stepped a 25-year-old woman who had been imprisoned, interrogated, declared illegitimate, and nearly executed just for existing. And she stepped in with a smile. Her coronation day dawned cold, but the streets overflowed with tens of thousands of cheering subjects desperate for hope. Elizabeth, draped in white and gold, rode through London as if she were the embodiment of renewal. People pushed forward just to graze her gown. Mothers held up their children so they could witness the woman who might save their future. Elizabeth played her role flawlessly. She reached out to touch the hands of ordinary citizens. She listened. She asked questions. She smiled, not the practiced smile of royalty, but the warm, human smile of someone who understood suffering. The English people saw not just a queen, but a survivor, a symbol, a chance. And she knew it. "My people," she whispered to one of her ladies, "are my greatest treasure." But love was not enough. Elizabeth inherited a kingdom ready to collapse. She had to rebuild its political core without provoking rebellion or foreign invasion. She had to balance the demands of both Protestants and Catholics without alienating either side. She had to restore the treasury without raising taxes. And above all, she had to survive. Everyone wanted to control her. Foreign ambassadors sought her hand in marriage, hoping to manipulate England through her. Advisors competed for influence. Catholic nobles whispered that a woman could not rule alone. Protestant zealots demanded radical reforms. Spain's King Philip II, her late sister's husband, believed he had the right to guide her. But Elizabeth knew the truth. Marriage would mean surrender. A husband divan, a foreign king could legally overrule her. Parliament could pressure her. Other nations could use the marriage against England. And worst of all, a husband could claim to rule in her place.
So Elizabeth chose a weapon far sharper than any army?
She left the question of marriage open. She flirted. She hinted. She negotiated. She promised nothing. Marriage became her shield, a diplomatic tool so effective that kings and princes across Europe danced in circles around her as they tried and failed to win her. But her brilliant game came with a price. For all her political intelligence, Elizabeth was still human, and she loved one man more deeply than she ever admitted: Robert Dudley. Tall, charming, handsome, and familiarly had known her since childhood. He understood her fears, her ambitions, her loneliness. When she became queen, he became her master of the horse, a position that put him constantly by her side. Their closeness scandalized the court. Four queens in a changing world. Mary to Anne, the sisters who saved a kingdom. The throne of England had never felt more unstable than in the winter of 1688. King James II, brother to Charles II. Father to Mary and Anne had pushed the kingdom to the brink. His open Catholic rule clashed violently with a nation fiercely committed to Protestant identity. Parliament whispered, nobles plotted, and even the army shifted uneasily. In hidden halls and candlelit drawing rooms, the name Mary echoed like a cautious prayer. Mary, eldest daughter of James II, wife of William of Orange, and England's best hope for stability. She had never expected to rule. She had never wanted to rule. But destiny rarely asks permission. When the glorious revolution was sparked without rivers of blood, without a battlefield, royal sisters were thrust into a world they did not fully understand. For Mary, it meant ruling beside a husband who was both ally and competitor. For Anne, it meant surviving the political storms of a divided court, countless pregnancies that ended in heartbreak, and a nation that tried to shape her into something she was not. But behind the portraits and royal protocols, these women were far more powerful than history often admits. Their choices would rebuild the monarchy itself and cement the foundations of modern Britain. The making of a dual monarchy. When Mary returned to England with William in 1689, the people cheered but also watched. Would she be the true ruler, or was William steering the kingdom? The arrangement Parliament crafted was unlike anything England had seen. A joint monarchy. Mary II and William III would rule together, sharing sovereignties, symbolizing the victory of constitutional monarchy over absolute power. For Mary, This demanded a delicate balance. She adored William deeply, yet she was afraid of losing herself in his political shadow. She knew that many believed she was the rightful monarch, yet she also understood that Europe needed William's strategic mind and military expertise to stand against Louis XIV of France. When William left England on long military campaigns, Mary took full command of the crown. Her council followed her lead. Parliament respected her decisiveness. She negotiated, strategized, and governed with a calm clarity that surprised even her critics. She proved quietly but brilliantly that she was every bit as capable as her father and uncle before her. But behind every moment of strength was the deep wound of betrayal or father's heartbreak. When she accepted the crown, Mary loved James II as a daughter, but could not support him as a monarch. The guilt followed her like a shadow. Anne, the sister in the shadows while Mary ruled, Anne lived a different life, one filled with loss and political strain. Anne's marriage to Prince George of Denmark was loving but simple, a stark contrast to the royal drama around her. But tragedy followed her relentlessly. 17 pregnancies, and none of her children lived to adulthood. Each loss chipped away at her heart, but strengthened her empathy and resolve. Politically, Anne became a pawn in the battle between two powerful women, Mary II, her sister, and Sarah Churchill, her closest friend. Sarah was bold, brilliant, and dangerously influential. She whispered political ideas into Anne's ear, guiding her decisions, shaping her ambitions. Mary saw this as a threat. Sisterly affection slowly twisted into tension. While Mary ruled confidently, Anne's resentment grew not toward the crown, but toward the idea that she was being pushed aside. Yet underneath the sibling conflict lived genuine love. When Mary died suddenly in 1694 from smallpox at just 32, Anne's tears were real. She had lost not a queen, but a sister, and now the throne awaited her, and ascends. The final Stuart queen, Anne became queen in 1702, stepping into a nation still recovering from war and political unrest. She was not glamorous like Elizabeth, not commanding like Mary, not fierce like Victoria would be one day, but Anne possessed quiet strength that made her perfect for her era. Her reign saw one of the most critical political events in British history. The Act of Union 1707, England and Scotland unified into a single kingdom. Great Britain, this was not merely a legal document, was a reimagining of what monarchy could be, and understood the emotional and political necessity of unity. She spoke gently where others argued. She compromised where others demanded. She achieved what centuries of kings had failed to secure. But during this transformation, Anne endured more personal conflicts. Her relationship with Sarah Churchill shattered in spectacular fashion. Sarah grew too controlling, too ambitious. She pushed Anne beyond comfort, criticized her when she did not obey, and grew jealous when Anne sought comfort in new friendships. Their falling out was vicious, one of the greatest royal friendships turned rivalries. Anne's health failed her in her final years. She could barely walk, her body swollen and weak, yet she never stopped ruling. Her dedication to her people remained absolute. When she died in 1714, the Stuart line ended with her, yet her legacy lived on in the United Kingdom she helped create, a quiet yet mighty chapter in royal history. Mary II and Anne ruled during a time when kings dominated Europe. These sisters changed the course of the monarchy. They strengthened Parliament. They redefined the crown as a constitutional force. They built the political foundation that Elizabeth II and King Charles III still stand on today. They may not be remembered with the thunder of Elizabeth I or the stern grandeur of Victoria, but without Mary II and modern Britain simply would not exist. 5. Queen Victoria, the Iron Empress, who reforged an empire around 1,000 words. The world changed the moment Alexandrina Victoria opened her eyes. Born in 1819 to a collapsing royal line, she was never meant to wear the crown. The royal family was fractured, the monarchy's reputation was tarnished, and the empire looked more fragile than ever. And yet, within this chaos, a tiny girl fatherless before she could walk wood one day forged the longest and most influential reign in British history. But before she became the iron-willed ruler the world remembers, Victoria's childhood was a silent battlefield. A princess in a gilded cage, Victoria's early life was suffocating. Her mother, the Duchess of Kent, and the ambitious Sir John Conroy created the Kensington system, a strict, isolating regime designed to control and manipulate the young princess. Victoria was never allowed to walk downstairs alone, never allowed to sleep without someone in the same room, never permitted friends, freedom, or privacy. Every moment was monitored, every relationship filtered, every choice controlled. They wanted to shape her into a puppet queen, one they could rule through. But the cage only forged steel in her spirit. By the time she turned 18, Victoria had a backbone of iron and a determination sharper than any blade. She vowed that the moment she became queen, she would free herself from the suffocating grip of Conroy and her mother. That moment came sooner than she expected. A queen at 18, and a nation holds its breath. When King William IV died, the palace erupted with urgency. Ministers rushed through corridors, servants whispered prayers, and the Privy Council assembled at dawn. At the center of this storm stood a small, frightened yet resolute girl, Queen Victoria. In that moment, she made her first command. No Conroy, no overbearing mother, no Kensington system. Victoria stepped into her power with astonishing clarity. She worked tirelessly, studying state papers late into the night, learning the machinery of the empire she now controlled. But power is cold, and Victoria, lonely, young, and inexperienced, longed for a partner she could trust. That partner came from Germany. The love that built an empire, Victoria and Prince Albert, was everything Victoria was not. Calm, analytical, disciplined, Victoria was emotional, fiery, passionate. Their marriage in 1840 began a partnership that redefined the monarchy. Albert modernized royal finances, pushed scientific advancement, and took control of political strategy. Victoria handled public appearances, emotional leadership, and national unity. Together, they were unstoppable. 6. The Shadow Queens. How 3 women held an empire together. After Victoria, around 1,000 words when Queen Victoria died in 1901. An era ended, but the empire she built did not collapse. Instead, 3 extraordinary women stepped into the void she left behind. Their names were well known, yet their power was quietly hidden behind the thrones they supported. These were the Shadow Queens, women whose influence never appeared on official documents, but whose decisions shaped wars, alliances, culture, and the very survival of the monarchy itself. They were Alexandra of Denmark, the queen who charmed the world. Mary of Teck, the queen who saved the monarchy from scandal. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, the queen who faced down Hitler. Their stories are rarely told together, but without them, the British royal family might not exist today. Alexandra, the queen who healed a broken throne when Edward VII inherited the crown after Victoria. Britain doubted him. He was known as a playboy prince, too wild, too indulgent, too unpredictable to lead an empire. But by his side stood Alexandra of Denmark, the woman who became the heart of the British people during a time of transition. The people's queen, Alexandra, was beautiful, compassionate, and instinctively modern. She visited hospitals, comforted the sick, supported the poor, and even walked through dangerous slums without fear. At a time when royals remained distant symbols, she became human, touchable, relatable, loved. She set trends in fashion, changed British etiquette, and softened the monarchy's image after decades of Victoria's stern rule. The pain she hid behind her grace was immense suffering. A childhood illness left her with a permanent limp and partial deafness. She lived through her husband's endless affairs, but Alexandra endured everything with quiet dignity, refusing to let pain or humiliation weaken her role. The queen of diplomacy, she also understood international politics better than anyone expected. Europe was a web of royal families. Alexandra's sister to the Empress of Russia and daughter of the King of Denmark stabilized dangerous tensions between nations. Her charm prevented conflicts that might have erupted decades earlier. When Edward VII died, the empire mourned deeply, not just for the king, but for the queen who kept him steady. But the monarchy was about to enter its most perilous moment yet. Mary of Teck, the queen who saved the monarchy twice. Mary of Teck was not born to be a queen. She was modest, introverted, and painfully disciplined. Yet she would become the backbone of the royal family during its greatest crisis. She was meant to marry another man. Mary was originally engaged to Prince Albert Victor, the heir to the throne. When he suddenly died in 1892, she was heartbroken, but duty demanded stability. She later married his younger brother, the future King George V, and with that marriage, she inherited a royal family on the edge of collapse. A world àtoire. 7. Victoria's final battle. How a queen built an age and became an empire. By the late 1890s, Queen Victoria was no longer just a monarch. She had become an institution, a living symbol of an empire that stretched across a quarter of the world. But behind the legend was a fragile, elderly woman carrying nearly a century of love, grief, war, and responsibility on her shoulders. The world had changed beyond recognition since the day she first walked into the throne room as an 18-year-old girl. Electric lights lit London streets. Trains thundered across continents. Telegrams carried messages further and faster than any messenger on horseback ever had. The British Empire had grown into a global titan, its flags planted across oceans, deserts, jungles, and cities. And yet, the queen who oversaw it all felt a growing loneliness. For all her power, Victoria faced her final years without the one person who gave her life meaning, Prince Albert. Decades after his death, she still wore black. She still kept his rooms untouched. She still felt his presence whenever she faced difficult decisions. The world saw a mighty queen. She saw a life forever marked by loss. The empire's grandmother, by the time she became an old woman. Victoria had earned a new title, the grandmother of Europe. Her children had married into the royal families of Russia, Germany, Denmark, Norway, Spain, and Greece. Her descendants would sit on nearly every major European throne in the early 20th century. This was not an accident. Victoria had used marriages as her most powerful diplomatic tool. Where armies and treaties failed, family succeeded. Through weddings, alliances, and carefully arranged unions, she helped hold together a continent constantly on the verge of war. Her own letters reveal her strategy. Let my children bind Europe in the only way that endures through blood, affection, and duty. Peace, she believed, could be inherited, but destiny had a cruel twist waiting. The very grandchildren she united, the German Emperor Wilhelm II, the Russian Tsar Nicholas II, and the British King George V, would one day face each other in the First World War. Victoria would not live to see it, but she had sensed the growing tension. In her diary, she wrote, "Europe trembles beneath too many ambitions." The last great crisis in 1900, the Boer War, shook the empire. It was brutal, costly, and deeply controversial. Newspapers criticized the monarchy. Protests erupted. Foreign nations condemned Britain's harsh tactics. Even at age 80, Victoria demanded daily briefings. Ministers gathered around her chair as she lectured them with the same sharp authority she possessed as a young queen. An empire cannot endure without dignity, she warned her generals. Her voice was soft, but her words were iron. She encouraged soldiers at the front, wrote letters to widows who lost sons, and insisted on investigating reports of abuse in the South African camps. Victoria was old, but she was still the heartbeat of the empire. The final winter, by late 1900, her health began to fail. Doctors whispered of strokes, cataracts, and exhaustion. She struggled to walk. Her hand trembled as she signed papers, and yet she refused to stop working. Even in her final days, she asked for government dispatches to be read aloud. She dictated letters to her family. She reviewed military reports. Duty had forged her life, and she would not abandon it now. In January 1901, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Victoria slipped into unconsciousness at Osborne House. Her last words were whispered to her grandson, "Kaiser Wilhelm II, hold my hand, this is death." After 63 years on the throne, the longest reign in British history at the time, Queen Victoria died at age 81. The empire mourned as if the sun itself had gone dark. The end of an age, the birth of a legend. Her funeral was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Ships from every corner of the empire sailed in formation. Millions stood silent as her coffin passed. Black flags draped entire cities. But Britain was not only mourning a queen, It was mourning an entire era of Victorian age, an age that transformed the world through industry, expansion, innovation, and culture. And yet, Victoria left more than an empire. She left a blueprint for power, a system of monarchy that balanced tradition with modernity, a global identity rooted in stability and symbolism, a family web that connected Europe's rulers, and a legacy that influenced every British monarch who came after her.